Jalen Lecque was one of the most mysterious and electrifying prospects high school basketball had ever seen. They called him Baby Westbrook. The mixtapes were wild, the dunks were violent, and the first step looked unstoppable. And if you had asked hoop fans in 2019 who the next freak athlete to shock the NBA would be, Jalen Lecque's name was near the top of the list. He was explosive, fearless, and seemed destined to become a star. At 6 feet 4 inches with a chiseled frame and a reputation for highlight dunks, he had the perfect look for the modern NBA guard. But unlike most prospects, he didn't go to college. He jumped straight from prep school to the league, skipping Duke to chase the NBA dream head on. But fast forward to today, Jalen Lecque is no longer in the NBA. He bounced between the G League, short stints with Phoenix and Indiana, and overseas hoops, showing flashes of his raw athleticism, but never sticking. It wasn't a devastating injury. It wasn't a lack of effort. It was that the league just never really saw him as more than a developmental project. And now we're left asking the question, how bad is Jalen Lecque actually? Was he simply a mixtape product hyped as the next Westbrook? Did we overrate him because of his jaw-dropping athleticism? Or did the NBA give up too soon on a one-of-a-kind athlete who needed more time to develop? To figure that out, we need to rewind. Before the NBA, before the skipped college season, before the hype train got rolling. This is the full story of Jalen Lecque and why one of the most athletic guards of the past decade never found his place in the league. Jalen Lecque's basketball journey was unconventional from the start. And that's part of what made him such a fascinating prospect. Born and raised in the Bronx, he was modeled by the gritty New York City basketball culture, a place where toughness, flair, and fearless rim attacks are celebrated more than box scores. In those parks and gyms, Lecque learned how to play with an edge. He wasn't afraid of contact. He wasn't afraid of the moment. And even as a teenager, he carried himself like someone who knew he had something special. The first big step in his rise came when he transferred to Christ School in Arden, North Carolina. And it was here that the legend of his athleticism really started to spread. Coaches, scouts, and even his own teammates couldn't believe what they were seeing. A high school guard with a vertical leap measured at 44 inches? That wasn't normal. That was NBA-level explosiveness in a kid who was still figuring out the finer points of the game. Every fast break felt like a highlight waiting to happen. He'd explode past defenders with his lightning-quick first step, and if you gave him even half a runway, he'd take off and finish at the rim with authority. Word got around quickly, and soon mixtape crews and recruiting services were making the trip just to capture the next viral dunk. By the time he transferred to Brewster Academy in New Hampshire for his senior year, Jalen Lecque wasn't just an exciting prospect. He was a phenomenon. Brewster is one of the premier prep programs in the country, a place that had produced NBA players like Donovan Mitchell, Will Barton, and TJ Warren. The competition was fierce every single day in practice, and the spotlight was even brighter than ever. But Lecque thrived in that environment. Surrounded by Division I talent, he stood out not just for his freakish bounce, but for his aggression and confidence. At Brewster, Lecque became the kind of player you couldn't take your eyes off. He didn't just dunk, he attacked the rim with the kind of violence that made you think of a young Russell Westbrook. That's where the nickname Baby Westbrook really took hold. His game wasn't polished. The jumper came and went. His decision-making could be wild. But the way he exploded to the rim made him one of the most electrifying guards in the country. Gyms would buzz the moment he touched the ball, because everyone was waiting for him to do something that would end up on Instagram by the end of the night. The hype skyrocketed when Lecque committed to NC State in October 2018. Wolfpack fans were ecstatic. They pictured him as the centerpiece of Kevin Keatts' fast-paced system. A guard who could get downhill in transition, throw down momentum-shifting dunks, and become the next great high-flying star in the ACC. It seemed like a perfect match. The kind of situation where his athleticism could shine while his skills developed against high-level competition. But here's where Lecque's story took a sharp turn. After reclassifying and spending that final year at Brewster, he surprised everyone by declaring straight for the 2019 NBA draft. he never played a single minute for NC State. Instead, he decided to bet entirely on his athleticism and potential, skipping college to chase his NBA dream. It was a bold move that divided scouts and fans alike. Some believed he had the raw tools you just couldn't pass on. An athlete so rare that with the right development, he could become something special. Others were skeptical, seeing him as more of a mixtape star than a polished basketball player. But one thing was undeniable. At the high school level, Jalen Lecque was pure box office. Every game felt like an event. Every dunk felt like a viral clip. And his fearlessness carried him all the way to the draft. The 2019 NBA draft was supposed to be Jalen Lecque's chance to cash in on all the hype he'd built up at Brewster. But when draft night came and went, reality set in quick. His name was never called. That didn't mean the dream was over. Hours later, he signed with the Phoenix Suns on a 4-year deal. A classic developmental flyer on a raw but tantalizing athlete. And at first, Suns fans thought they might have struck gold. In open gyms and practices, Lecque's athleticism was on full display. Teammates were shocked at how high he could get off the floor. Devin Booker famously called him different just because of his bounce. If you saw the practice clips, those dunks, those violent drives, you'd think the Suns had uncovered the next viral guard. But here's the thing about the NBA. It isn't about mixtape highlights. It's about production. You can wow people in an empty gym, but when the lights come on, you've got to deliver. And in his rookie year, Lecque barely got the chance. He appeared in just 5 NBA games, averaging 2 points. The Suns mostly stashed him with their G League affiliate, the Northern Arizona Suns, where he put up respectable numbers, double-digit scoring, some highlight dunks, and flashes of defensive potential. But when scouts looked deeper, nothing screamed NBA ready. His jumper wasn't falling at a high clip. His handle was loose against pro-level defenders, and he wasn't setting up teammates in a way that fit the mold of a modern point guard. The Suns front office liked him, but the team had playoff aspirations. They didn't have the luxury of developing a raw guard who needed years to figure it out. And that meant Jalen Lecque became a trade piece. In November 2020, he was included in the Chris Paul blockbuster deal that sent CP3 to Phoenix. On paper, it was another chance, a fresh start with the Indiana Pacers, a team that had a history of finding and developing overlooked talent. But once again, the story stayed the same. Lecque was bouncing between practice courts and G League gyms. He showed flashes, those same end-to-end bursts, the violent dunks in transition, the energy that made coaches perk up. But he never carved out a role. In total, he appeared in just 9 NBA games across 2 seasons, averaging 1.7 points. The problem was clear. For all his baby Westbrook comparisons, Lecque was missing the polish that made Westbrook more than just an athlete. Russ came into the league with rawness too, but he had an elite motor, a relentless edge, and the ability to impact games even when the shot wasn't falling. Lecque, by contrast, was streaky. His jumper wasn't reliable. His decision-making was shaky, and he wasn't quite big enough to shift over to the wing. He was a guard trapped between positions, not a true floor general, not a reliable scorer of the ball. And in the NBA, teams don't wait forever. If you can't contribute in the role they need, they'll move on. That's exactly what happened. By the end of 2021, Jalen Lecque was out of the league, just 2 years after skipping college to chase his NBA dream. The baby Westbrook hype had fizzled, not because he stopped being athletic. He was still one of the best leapers in the entire sport, but because athleticism alone doesn't guarantee you a seat in the NBA. What's crazy is that in the G League, Jalen Lecque often looked like the guy people thought he could be. You'd see flashes of the baby Westbrook nickname come to life. Explosive first steps, violent dunks, 20-point nights where he looked unstoppable. The highlights never stopped. Clips of him throwing down windmills or cockback jams would circulate again, reminding fans of the freak athlete who once jumped straight from high school to the NBA. But here's the thing about the G League. It's full of hoopers who can put up numbers. It's not just about scoring. It's about efficiency, fitting into a role, and proving you can translate your game to the NBA level. And that's where Lecque never fully separated himself. After Phoenix and Indiana moved on, Lecque's next chance came in October 2021 when he signed a training camp deal with the Milwaukee Bucks. It wasn't a long-term fit, but it landed him with their G League affiliate, the Wisconsin Herd. For the Herd, Lecque did what he always does: score in bursts, attack the rim like it was personal, and make fans in small gyms rise out of their seats. But once again, the flaws showed through. He wasn't a knockdown shooter, hovering around low 30% from deep. He wasn't a floor general, often struggling to run an offense or keep turnovers down. He was exciting, but not consistent. Still, his athleticism kept him on the radar. In 2022, the Dallas Mavericks gave him a look in Summer League. And for a moment, it felt like maybe he could sneak his way back into an NBA roster spot. But Summer League is where prospects have to show they can shoot, defend, and fit in next to star players. And Lecque didn't do enough to change the narrative. By the end of the summer, he was still on the outside looking in. That fall, he got another chance. This time with the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, the Houston Rockets G League affiliate. If you know anything about the Vipers, it's that they've been one of the most successful G League teams in developing talent. Guys like Clint Capella, KJ Martin, and even Gary Payton II all sharpened their games there. For Lecque, it was a great landing spot. And sure enough, he had his moments. There were games where he looked every bit like an NBA guard, putting up 15 points, flying around in transition, and reminding everyone why he was once such a hyped prospect. But here's the hard truth. Those moments never added up to a full season of impact. Lecque spent 2 years with Rio Grande Valley, from 2022 to 2024, and while the highlights were there, the consistency wasn't. The jumper still hadn't come around, the playmaking was hit or miss, and defensively, he wasn't versatile enough to guard multiple positions. That's why, year after year, Jalen Lecque found himself grinding in the G League without a stable NBA call-up. He could score, he could dunk, he could flash brilliance, but NBA coaches weren't asking for mixtape plays. They were asking, can you hit open threes? Can you defend your position? Can you run a second unit without turning the ball over? And too often, Lecque's answer was no. In the G League, he was electric, but in the NBA, he was still a question mark. By 2023, it was clear Jalen Lecque's NBA window was closing fast. He'd had his shots with Phoenix and Indiana. He'd spent years grinding in the G League, but the call-ups weren't coming. Like so many athletic guards before him, the next step was overseas, a chance to keep chasing the game, rebuild his stock, and prove that his bounce wasn't just for YouTube highlights. In August 2024, Lecque signed to play in Israel in the Israeli Basketball Premier League. For Lecque, it was the first real opportunity to reset outside the NBA ecosystem. Israel has produced and revived plenty of guards over the years, and Lecque got a fresh runway to showcase the same rim-attacking energy that made him famous back at Brewster. He wasn't a headliner, but the flashes were still there. Explosive drives, transition dunks, and the kind of athletic bursts that made you wonder, what if the NBA had more patience? Now, as the most recent update on Jalen is in August 2025, he signed to continue his pro basketball career in Turkey. For Lecque, it's the latest chapter in a career defined by raw athleticism and constant grinding. And that's the thing. At just 24 years old, Jalen Lecque's story isn't over. He still has one of the best verticals in basketball. He still plays with aggression. And overseas, he has the platform to turn flashes into consistency. But as far as the NBA goes, that window is almost shut. So now we want to hear from you. Were you a Jalen Lecque believer? Did you buy into the baby Westbrook hype coming out of Brewster? Or did you always think he was more of a mixtape legend than a true NBA player? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear where you stand on Jalen Lecque and whether you think his NBA story is over or just on pause. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you never miss another deep dive like this. And if you really want to support what we're building here, join our Patreon community. You'll get exclusive content, behind-the-scenes breakdowns, and even a chance to help pick the next player we cover. Links down in the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.